Hi, I'm Trey Sarten, and you're listening to Sweet Success.
You've just checked in to Sweet Success. Join me, Katie Cline, for exclusive conversations with hotel executives, hospitality leaders, and industry innovators. Together, we'll uncover the strategies and techniques these masters of hospitality relentlessly refine. Whether you're already in the industry or just starting out, tune in every week to unlock the secret to your sweet success. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Sweet Success. I'm your host, Katie Cline, and today I am just so excited to have Mr. Trey Sarten on the show. Trey currently works as the Chief Communications Officer and Head of Public Affairs for Anywhere Real Estate. But before he was doing that, Trey was my boss. He led global brand communications for Starwood Hotels and Resorts and hired me many moons ago, taking a chance on me and welcoming me into this world of hospitality that we all know and love. In addition to being just a fantastic manager, he has more than 20 years of communications, reputation management, and brand building experience, including leading the award-winning enterprise brand transformation when his current company rebranded from Realogy to Anywhere. He was named a 2024 Riz Media Newsmaker, a coveted list of the top professionals changing the game across the real estate industry. Trey, thank you so much for joining me today.
Hello, Katie. It's so great to be here. Thank you for having me. I'm so excited for this conversation.
I know I covered a lot in that introduction, but tell us in your own words how you got started in hospitality.
Oh my gosh, I didn't know much about hospitality at all, except that I'm the grandson of two Southern grandmothers, and that was sort of hospitality was in our blood. But I didn't grow up traveling the world. I didn't, we would do the Florida vacation, once a summer, but that was really it. And so I really just fell into it by chance. I moved to New York after college. I thought I wanted to work in celebrity and entertainment PR, and I kind of fell adjacent to that at a PR firm who had taken on a client, W Hotels, and they wanted to infuse fashion and lifestyle, celebrity entertainment into the brand. The tricky thing was this agency didn't specialize in travel or in hospitality, and so a lot of my bosses and managers had no experience with travel media or working in the lodging space. And so it was a totally blank canvas and I had sort of the opportunity, the permission to just go and try things and work with different travel journalists around the country as we were opening and refurbishing different W hotels. So that's how I got started.
We have a lot of similarities in that story. First of all, I also grew up with the annual Florida vacation.
Pile into the back of the car, right?
Pile into the car. We were choosing the VHSs of what we were gonna watch in the back of the minivan, so completely hear you on that one. We also both started our careers, like you said, in fashion or kind of worlds adjacent to hotels and hospitality, but not in the industry, and something I really give you credit for is when I knew that I wanted to transition into hospitality, I would interview with hotel companies and airline companies, and oftentimes I would just hear over and over again, we're looking for someone who has experience in the industry. And it was only when I interviewed with you that you liked that I came from a different background and saw that as a strength. And, obviously now I know you also came from a varied background as well. I think that's just such a testament to you as a leader, as a manager, and also a testament to Starwood. It was such a special company and team that we were a part of.
Yeah, I mean, look, I can't take the credit for that fully. It's our boss there, Casey Kavanaugh, really looked at the talent across her team leading the comms for different brands. And she was never as interested in the folks who were hotel lifers, but she wanted people from outside I mean, even myself, yes, I had hotel and hospitality background, but I had done so much across entertainment and fashion and events and all kinds of different things. Like she really when she was more interested in the work I did in that space than what I had done in the travel media. And so she really infused that culture of bringing in people with different perspectives, different experience, different backgrounds. And of course, I mean, we love our hotel folks and super important to helping us understand the business and what's going on. But she really formed a team that was made up of so many different backgrounds and experiences. And I think that's part of where the magic was.
I couldn't agree more, and we saw that particularly come through in how strong the brands were and still are to this day. And while you were at Starwood, you launched some new hotel brands. You worked on a lot of rebrand projects. I mean, even when Starwood was acquired by Marriott, you branded the entire farewell tour. Hashtag Starwood Proud, something that still lives on in our alumni
Yes.
group still to this day. So, and now in your current role, you rebranded the company from Realogy to Anywhere. So, obviously, branding is one of your many superpowers. Before we talk about the tactics and what you do to actually brand or rebrand something, what do you think makes a good brand, makes a strong brand? And why do you think it's important for maybe any company, especially those in hospitality, to have one?
Well, look, I think it is any brand needs to have an authentic and ownable story in order to just break through and set themselves apart. It's noisy out there, right? And from a little kid, I've always been fascinated by branding. And, this is like super embarrassing, but I used to, if we would go, I grew up in a small town in Tennessee. If we'd go to Atlanta or Nashville to go shopping, back to school or whatever, I would save the packaging and the bags underneath my bed. Like I had stacked, and it drove my mom insane. But I loved to touch and feel a brand, the experience of the brand, how it made me feel when I put on the shirt or that new pair of jeans. And so I've always been fascinated by brands. And I think, as the world has gotten noisier, the importance of having a story that feels authentic to the product or the service that you're offering and that you can really own. And at the end of the day, at Starwood, we used to talk about like the sea of sameness and the idea of it's just a bed and a box. Like you're selling a good night's sleep, a warm shower, maybe a meal, depending on where you're at. And so it was ripe for reinvention. And I think that's where the leaders at Starwood really saw an opportunity to carve out niches across the different brands. And it was such an incredible education working with the different leaders we had on how they thought about brands' passions and experiences across the hotel to help it feel different in the marketplace.
I love what you're saying about sea of sameness. I mean, that couldn't be more true. And when a brand is doing it right, they cut through, right? You can actually understand what they stand for and they have a differentiated view or opinion. So,
Right.
tactically, how do you approach branding? Like, if we think about what you did with Realogy to Anywhere, or even all of the projects that you worked on at Starwood, like, what's step one?
Well, so, like so many of these projects that I've worked on have been in like really condensed time frames and really scrappy. And so, there are brand exercises that take, months and years to develop that, go through all kinds of focus groups and consumer studies and all that kind of stuff. I first start with listening and understanding like what is the business goal and the kind of objective with Realogy. This was a company that had been formed over the years through acquisition and M&A. There was a lot of debt associated with the company and how it had been formed over the time. People actually could not pronounce the name, and so I kind of giggled to myself at the beginning when you got it, like you nailed it. But people called it Realogy. They didn't understand what it meant, and so I first kind of listened to like, okay, what are we trying to solve for? We had new leadership at the company. We were transforming into more of an integrated company, an operations company versus just siloed businesses across the organization. And so, what does the business goal need? What is happening around the company? What's happening in the industry as well? And we had a lot of disruption, continue to have disruption in the industry. And so, starting from that place of just listening and being curious, then goes into, tons of research and looking at what is out there sort of understanding, like I talked about, like how do you break through? How do you differentiate yourself? What is something truly only you can own? And, people scratch their head sometimes on like how we landed on this name anywhere, but we started looking at, we have 6 brands across the portfolio, basically in every zip code around the country, also globally in many, many markets. So there's a tremendous scale. We have businesses across not only residential real estate, but mortgage and title and insurance and leads from global mobility. So moving people around the world as well as they transfer with companies. And so this like literally we're anywhere. But then we started talking about the consumer journey of anywhere. We can touch them along the path, no matter where they are. And we talked about the employee experience, which is important as well, that we can help them just because of that size and scale anywhere they may be in their career and how they can continue to build on that. So this name anywhere really started, to bubble up. And then, you and I both are communicators, right? And so you have to roll it out with a really strong communications plan. I did so many, team chats and employee sessions and industry things, just like these kinds of podcasts or whatever to help tell the story, to evangelize. We gave tools to our leaders to help them be able to communicate this shift. And we used this as a way to signal that we were not the same company we had been, 5 or 10 years ago, and we were moving in, to this new space. And so, how you launch it and think about introducing the brand to your different stakeholder groups is, in some ways as important as, the overall, brand study itself.
And the way you launch it probably is a predictor of its success, right? Like,
100%.
it's
Yeah.
great if you've rebranded and the name is awesome and the branding is great, but if nobody knows about it or can tell the story, where is it going?
I say, it's like the tree falls in the woods, right? Like if no one is there to hear it, and like
Mhm.
you don't talk about it or really understand, and then people in a vacuum make up their own stories and they start to take control of your narrative or your brand if you're not out there, communicating that as well. And so the launch piece of that is just so important in how you signal, the key kind of messages that you want to deliver through the brand.
Yeah. And something you touched on at the beginning was when you start, you listen and you're curious. And I think that's something that's so inherent to your nature. And something that was really interesting to me after Starwood was acquired and you decided to leave the business, you did something that I think none of us saw coming. You and your partner left your jobs and you went traveling for a year around the world. So tell me a bit of what that was like, especially as someone who's been, working nonstop for all of their adult life, and what were some of the highs and maybe lows along the way?
Yeah, I mean, this was one of those like big risk, big reward kind of moments in my life. I had an incredible opportunity to do that with Martin, my husband. And, I like kind of joke I went from like town cars to tuk-tuks. Like I had seen the world in such a different way working at Starwood and traveling around the world to open hotels. And, you know how it is, Katie, like you show up and the hotel team greets you and they take you to the best places in town and you're staying in an amazing hotel. You're having this great experience. All of that changed when we started traveling. We strapped on the backpacks and started traveling on our own. And, we had to get haircuts in markets that didn't even understand how to cut, a white person's hair. And we had to buy groceries or we had to figure out like where could we stay in a market and that kind of thing. And so we really had to, it was really a different experience, like feet on the ground, like out in the world. And we went to some of the same places that I had traveled to in my past work, but I saw them in such a different and kind of, unique way. We also, speaking of branding, like we branded our experience because I am truly a brand nerd. And so, we stood up a blog, we called it Journey Life in order to just keep up, help let friends and family and former coworkers keep up with us on our trip. We experimented with social media. We did some actual PR and press around it as well. And so part of it became like we were just having fun and sort of testing and learning along the way of like, what was happening in the social space and sort of playing around with being content creators and brand builders, which, helped me as I also, came back into the workforce. It sounds crazy to say, but I mean, this was 7 or so years ago, and social was still kind of developing in a lot of ways. And influencers and content creators were not, not at the same level they are today. So that was cool. I mean, it was amazing to be able to do this with, someone whom I love dearly and, is a partner to me in life. And so to see the world together, that was sometimes I missed that when I was traveling for work. You get on the airplane by yourself and sometimes you realize it's been 12 or 24 hours since you actually spoke to anyone and had a conversation. And so being able to do that with someone and share the experience and then share it through Journey Life and what we were doing with and interact with people back home and also people who had started following us or we would run into in different markets was really cool too.
Yeah, I loved following along. It made me feel like I was a bit there. I also think From Town Cars to Tuk Tuks is your future memoir name, and I am happy to buy that first copy. I would love to read that story. But you're right, like, it was a different experience, especially with Starwood and later at Marriott. I mean, not only did you have that kind of level of travel, but you had, like, built-in friends in every location. So, yes, we were, I won't say lonely, but traveling by ourselves a lot of time for work, but then you'd arrive and you almost had this built-in group of people that you could talk to and ask silly questions to in the hotel team, which was nice. And while you guys were traveling, you visited so many different places. You stayed in really various types of accommodations from some hotels, but also to a lot of short term rentals. So I'm curious, as someone coming from the hotel industry and then seeing what short term rentals mean in different places around the world, what do you think are some of the areas of opportunities for short term rentals potentially to learn from hotels?
Yeah, I think short-term rentals have evolved, over the last few years, especially kind of in a post-pandemic world. I think there's a lot of talk out there about people who save a penny and try to make a dollar, right? And so you see these like memes out there of, the 75 things you need to do before you check out of your short-term rental, taking out the garbage and cleaning down the kitchen cabinets and emptying the trash, all these things. And I think, you know, don't do that in like sacrifice of the overall kind of experience and think about some of the most memorable places we stayed at in that were short-term rentals. They had their own kind of unique branding touches themselves, and whether that was in literal like collateral around the space, or the toiletries, or just the snacks that they would leave, or these kinds of things. I mean, it's hospitality at the end of the day, and so ensuring that guests feel welcome but also have an experience that is different and unique that only you can deliver. And whether you have one short-term rental, whether it's an apartment over your garage, whether you have many, like thinking about how you touch the guest when they arrive through their stay until they depart, I think is something that we shouldn't forget, and we shouldn't sacrifice the penny for the dollar here.
That save a penny, make a dollar that you just said, that I think articulates it so beautifully, right? And we're seeing that a lot in the short-term rental space now. I think, like you touched on, what the consumer expectation of the rental is has shifted. My husband's family has been going to the same place in Maine since his parents were children. And still to this day, I had to mail in a physical check to book that place. I had to pay extra for linens, which will be folded on the bed for us to make when we arrive. I mean, that is just not really what most people expect nowadays. They expect there to not only be a garbage bag, but to be enough garbage bags for the length of their stay. And I think what you've touched on in terms of think about that entire journey for them from check-in till checkout, and make sure you're delivering or ideally over delivering on that.
Yeah, 100%. And like, how do you, some of the best places too were like they would show us how to experience the location as well. And I think that's something, not to be forgotten because, most of the time, the folks who have the short term rentals are from the area or have been going to the area or know the area. And so, how do you help the guest experience that with your favorite places for breakfast or the great hike that is, undiscovered in the area or those kinds of things? And so, bringing in some of the location and your local knowledge is such an amazing touch that I think people just can't underestimate.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, anyone can use Google and say, best restaurant in this area, right? But you're going to get a generic list. And maybe that's not the best for you or for what you're looking for. And to have that personalized recommendation from that person, but maybe even for what they think you would like the most is the positive side, right? On the negative side of the travel industry is crises, right? And you and I know this better than anyone else. We worked on a lot of crises together at Starwood, and I really have you to thank for that being a skill that I have in my tool belt now. When you asked me to join the crisis communications team at Starwood, I was petrified. So that told me that that was definitely something I needed to do and a skill I needed to learn and to hone. And work on it we did. I really think that any crisis that happens in a human life has happened in a hotel, will happen again in a hotel. And I know there are unfortunately too many to count, but are there any crisis stories that stand out to you from your time at Starwood?
Yeah, I mean, you're totally right. I love that phrase, like, anything that's happened in a human life can happen in a hotel. And it's true. I mean, it's a 24/7, business that you're hosting someone. And so things go wrong and people mess up and, different things happen. One of the most kind of horrifying and tragic crises that I worked on, and, I think you probably worked on because it really was a lot of us that started having to pitch in was what became known as the Bali suitcase murder at the St. Regis there. And, that was something that, it was an American guest who had been, tragically killed by her, allegedly, I guess I should say, daughter and son. I haven't been following the case, so I don't want to say anything that
Okay.
accuse anyone of anything, but and put her body in a suitcase and tried to and it got national attention. I mean, this was the Daily Mail every day, and People Magazine was covering this. They were kind of well known in Chicago, and so we were on calls at 8 a.m. and 8 p.m. for weeks every day, no matter whether it was the weekend or not. And, it was difficult to control from New York City. And there were cultural norms that occur in Bali around police investigations, where they literally take the accused back to the scene of the crime and have them walk the police through how they did or did not do it. And so thinking about, at a very high-end luxury property with, operating 24/7 with guests, how you control that. The hotel team, the local team were amazing. They were so great. And they really looked to us to help kind of guide through that time. And it was definitely a lot of through that, those 8 a.m. and 8 p.m. calls for weeks and weeks on end. But it was incredible to work across kind of time zones with the teams and learn. And I think similar to some of the things we talked about before with like, branding and different, different things like the listening piece of any sort of crisis situation is always so key. And like, I first try to just understand what are the facts and what is going on. And knowing that, especially when you're working in a global environment, not every market is the same, not every situation, not every media or journalist is going to approach it in the same way. And so, really trying to just understand and be empathetic in that, understanding, knowing that it's stressful for the people who are on the ground dealing with this In some cases, it affects them directly, if you're talking about natural disasters or whatnot. And so being a good listener, I think, is key. And then trying to be kind of the one that, while they're so in it, helps them see kind of the longer term kind of picture here, like what you may or may not want to say, or how are you thinking about how the guests may be perceiving this and all those things. And so, really just trying to be a counselor and a sounding board for them when they're in the heat of the moment. And sometimes it's literally heat, that they're
Sure.
dealing.
Hey there, real estate lovers. Ever heard of Anywhere? I know you've seen their brands like Coldwell Banker and Century 21 on yard signs. Maybe even use their title, mortgage, or relocation companies. But listeners, Anywhere is way more than just buying and selling real estate. You can build a meaningful career with them too. They are an employer of choice in roles like brokerage management, operations, technology, marketing, and so many more impactful parts of the real estate transaction. Their hybrid workplace offers flexibility. Their national scale means offices everywhere. And their mix of businesses means you carve your own path. If you're curious how Anywhere empowers everyone's next move, visit www.anywhere.re. It always just blew my mind at the complexity, right? Like, not only, like you said, there's cultures involved, there's time zones involved. There's also like so many facets of the business involved, the hotel team, the corporate team. Within corporate, you have communications and legal and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? So it is not a straightforward situation as much as maybe some would seem at first glance. And I think what you touched on about the other guests too, right? Someone just checked in to the hotel for their honeymoon or, their once in a lifetime vacation, and how are we compartmentalizing it so that that is not going to affect their holiday as well?
Yeah. Yeah, and a lot of times in these situations, people react, right? They want to do something, they want to help, they want to say something. And I do think that's where the pause and the listen becomes so important, to really first understand. Now, you may need to move very fast in doing that. You may need to listen quick and then really try to understand what's going on very fast. But instead of just jumping right into it, really taking the time, pause, listen, get the facts, so that you don't spend the rest of that crisis like cleaning up what you said before, or redoing something that creates more kind of strain or issue with the guest, if we're talking about hotels. And so that is something throughout my career I've learned, but I also continue to learn, because it's just human nature to like want to react really quickly. But that pause right at the beginning of a situation, I think, is really important.
The pause and listen is not only great advice in crises, but like great life advice. I feel like too, like in all facets of life, let's just pause and listen more.
Yeah, sure, sure.
Well, shifting on to maybe more happier topics. Anywhere is the parent company to some of the world's best real estate brands. So, how was that transition for you from hotels to real estate? I imagine hospitality is probably still quite central to a lot of what you do.
Yeah, at the end of the day, it's a service business, right? And you're dealing with clients or customers, and you're dealing with them at times that can be quite emotional. Not unlike kind of what you talked about, the guests showing up for their honeymoon or wedding or the family vacation. Like, there's a lot of emotion behind that hotel experience and stay, beyond just the transaction itself. And so, when I was recruited here by someone we used to work with at Starwood. And, he had John Payton, who you and I both worked with closely. He had a lot of trust in me from our time at Starwood, but I had never even bought a house when I started at the company. I don't know how many people, how many of my current colleagues even understand that, but like, I did not know the business, but I did those things we just talked about. I listened, I researched. John one time said, and I used to report to him, and he said in one of my reviews, like, you're a really fast learner. And I think that's because of the curiosity and the number of times I was on a call and I'm like, let me just Google that real quick and see
Right.
what real estate law or regulation? Are you actually talking about what does that
Right.
acronym mean? So I had to, I had to be a quick study and learn the business. It's highly complex. It's very regulated, which is different from, from the hospitality space in a lot of ways. And it's also really fragmented. States and local markets have their own rules and their own ways of operating and regulation. And so also understanding across like the overall landscape. The nice thing for me, I started here in external communications, and so there was a lot of crossover in the media and the reporters who covered both the lodging space and the real estate space. So that was great to maintain some of those connections and relationships. I still talk to a lot of them today as well. So that was a bonus. And you're right, it is similar to the hotel world. There's a lot of crossover and, like I said, that service kind of mentality as well.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. You say it's different and fragmented, and of course it absolutely is. But your approach to learning this world was very similar to your approach to learning hospitality when you joined that world, right? There's a lot of acronyms. There's a lot of things that
Yes.
are specific to that world. But again, speaking to leadership and to the companies that you choose to join, it's really like, are we getting the right people who are curious, who are hungry, who Google on the side, who figure things out, and not so much worrying, oh, do they have experience in this field already?
Yeah, no, 100%. And I've built a team here over time, and I've looked for people who have some of that different experience and background, who can bring a different point of view. I think that's so important to any good kind of communication team or plan or initiative of like you need the different points of view. And so that diversity of experience and background has been really important to me in building, my team here. And that was definitely a lesson that I took away from Starwood, as we talked about earlier.
Yeah. And you talked about the emotional aspect of buying a house and that when you joined you hadn't bought one, but since you've joined, you have. So
Yeah.
I'd love to just hear your experience in buying a home, but also both working for anywhere and from the experience that you had yourself. What value do you think that a real estate agent really brings to that emotional process?
Yeah. So, a lot of people don't know or think about this, but we do have a friends and family program at Anywhere for real estate, which is awesome. So,
Mm.
when my husband and I started looking, I was reverse commuting out of Jersey City to headquarters out here. We kind of just drew a circle around HQ and said, I don't know, like we don't know a lot about New Jersey. We had been in New York City most of our careers. And so, let's just go start looking at some houses. So the first thing we did is call up the friends and family program, and they gave a concierge that helped us find an agent or connect with an agent in the market. Cause again, we didn't know the area that well. We
Right.
got an awesome agent, Ryan Bruin at Coldwell Banker Realty, and he started showing us around to some different houses. And it's funny, I just had this conversation with a friend of mine who lives in New York. I was like, don't don't get caught in the like New York City trap, because
Mhm.
when you start to go outside the city and look at real estate, you're like, oh my God, there's like the bathtub isn't in the kitchen, and there's not, 12 flights of stairs, and I have a yard and all this stuff. So there was a little bit of that in the beginning where we started like, our eyes got really wide, and he was great about kind of guiding us through and making sure we saw different types of properties so that
Right.
we made, a great decision for our family. And I do think real estate agents are those trusted advisors who help guide people through the process. The transaction, unlike hotels, the transaction is so infrequent. You may
Mhm.
buy two or three homes in your lifetime. The average person, obviously, if you're more in second, short term rentals and that kind of stuff, maybe you're buying real estate more frequently, but it's not like you're going every week to the grocery store and buying a
Right.
house, right? And so it's very infrequent. The markets are very different. And markets being even just the cycle of the market, where are you in it's a cyclical business. So where are you in the actual market itself, but then like physically the market. And so, finding an agent who you really trust to guide you through and kind of shepherd the experience. Katie, you've bought houses, and like lots of paperwork, lots of things to
Mhm.
sign, and like you know a lot of different, between the lawyers and the inspectors and the renovation crew. There's a lot to navigate and sort of coordinate across as well. And so agents play such a crucial role in that. And like we were talking before about like the short-term rentals, like they also just really know the location. They know the community. They know the ways of life there, the ebb and flow and what is happening. And so they can help really make the location real for someone who's maybe nervous about the move or doesn't really know where they want to be or the area and that kind of thing. And so there is a tremendous amount of emotion that also goes into the process, particularly when it's going to be your primary residence.
Yeah. Our agent, I couldn't speak more highly of her exactly for those reasons that you're sharing. And, one of the things she did for me in the most recent rental that we purchased was she showed me how the majority of sales that had happened in the neighborhood recently all went for over asking price. So that education saved us all a lot of time and hassle of me going, well, let's try and get a deal and make a cheaper offer just because I don't know, I think I should because the movies tell me I should because like you
Right.
said, it's so infrequent and it's not something that most of us are very practiced in. So therefore, when we went to the table with an offer, we got it accepted right away because she had done
Nice.
that homework for me. And then the more mind-blowing thing to me was when we did our final walkthrough right before going to the bank to sign all of the mortgage papers and everything, the hot water heater wasn't working. And the agent was the one who told me, "No, if they don't get this working before we sign papers, like we have the ability to negotiate again." And I was like, What? I would have no idea. I would be like, "Well, I guess it's broken and we gotta fix it
Right.
now."
Yeah. No, that's I mean, yeah, they see it all, right? And they're
Yeah.
like even if you've bought a home before, bought a couple of homes, right?
Yeah.
Like you're seeing it through the lens of that home or that experience, but they
Yeah.
see everything and every situation, and they know what to look out for. And yeah, that's amazing. I'm glad your agent was looking out for you in that case too.
Yeah, and you had mentioned, the cyclicalness of the market. So, are there any trends that you're seeing in real estate right now? And I know, $1,000,000 question, any predictions for the future? And no, I'm not asking about mortgage rates, but also, do you know about mortgage rates?
I know it really is the $1,000,000 question, I
Yeah.
guess. I mean, look, like there is an affordability problem in the US. Since
Mhm.
the financial crisis. We have not built enough homes in the country. And it's a tough thing to try to figure out. It is so local based on regulations. You have the YIMBYs versus the NIMBYs, and
Mhm.
like where we can actually have more inventory would help really the affordability issue. You know, rates are what the rates are going to be, right? And I
Mhm.
think the thing for consumers is stability and some level of certainty. And for, the last year or two, they've kind of bounced all around, and you don't really know, are they going to keep coming down? Like, am I missing out on an opportunity here? There's this saying in real estate: date the rate, marry the house, date the rate. And so, you can always refinance, you can always look at other kind of solutions on the rate. But the bigger issue here is that a lot of people are just locked into very extremely historically low rates, and they aren't moving. And
Right.
so literally moving,
Right.
they're not budging, because where are they going to go, and what are they gonna, what's that going to look like for them with with price and with rates at the levels that they are. And so we need to unstick some of this inventory, to help with affordability. Unlike maybe the more like fun or trend side of the business, Coldwell Banker Global Luxury just did a survey of their agents who at the high end who said, a lot of people are looking for these unicorn properties, the
Mm.
have it alls. They want something that is move in ready, that is chock full of amenities that they really don't have to do a lot of work and repair to, but that they want the home that has it all. And that also, is exciting and fun, but they're, unicorns are unicorns for a reason. They're harder to come by, harder to find, right? And so, I think that you will continue to see people with prices and rates where they are, try to find homes that don't need a lot of, you know, renovation or change to them, but really they, especially at the primary for the primary residence, that they can move in to right away. I also think there's this interesting kind of phenomenon of like what's happening in workplaces and, so many people who left cities and kind of more urban communities during the pandemic because they wanted more space and they wanted to have the pool and the yard and all of that kind of stuff. I think we will start to see a trend back toward community and people who are maybe feeling a bit isolated or lonely in these, environments moving more toward, maybe not totally urban, but sort of these mid-tier kind of cities where they can walk to the local coffee shop, where they can run into a neighbor on the sidewalk, where they can walk their dog. And so, like, while that's happening, you also have companies calling their employees back to work.
Mhm.
And so, what that means for kind of migration patterns coming out of maybe the more rural market growth that we saw coming out of 2020, I think that'll be something interesting to watch.
Yeah. I think what you touched on with walkability, at least personally, like once you've had it and then that gets taken away, that's a hard thing to lose.
Yep, it is. The groceries at your fingertips or the even just the natural kind of run-ins, and you see
Right.
that, even in office culture, right? And
Yeah.
the water cooler passing somebody in the hallway, the same thing goes in our communities. And when you run by a neighbor to wave hello or smile, and I think there are people who are kind of missing that in the decisions they made, coming out of the pandemic.
Sure. Absolutely. Well, Trey, this has been so fantastic. I can talk to you for literally forever. I have last three questions for you that we ask everyone. I want to first know what was the best hospitality experience you've ever had?
Well, recently, Martin and I took a trip to Antarctica, and
My
it was one of
dream.
those once in a lifetime kind of experiences. And we are not cruisers, but we had an incredible hospitality experience on the boat in Antarctica. And so much so I went up to the rooms director and said, like, I used to work in hotels and I do not know how you did this on like a floating, vehicle or whatever you call it in the middle of the ocean. And it was just everything was so on point and seamless, and the hotel staff or the room staff were incredible. They, your room was clean, but you never saw, you know trash in the hallways or linens,
Mhm.
dumped down by the stairwell or whatever. And it was just an incredible experience. And the great thing that they did was also help connect guests with one another. And we made
Mm.
some lifelong friendships on that trip. And, in fact, one of the women we met on the trip was coming here to our house in a week or so to catch up. And so the connections they were able to facilitate as well was truly incredible. And it was just an amazing experience.
What was the brand of the cruise that you took?
Called Quark Expeditions.
I've heard such good things about them. On the
There's a group of us from that we're already talking about, now we need to go to the North Pole after the Antarctica trip. And so we had such a great experience. I think that tells a lot about the
Yes.
company or the brand that you wanna return and spend time with them, particularly, again, because we are not, cruisers by nature. And
Yeah.
so we were nervous going into what it was gonna be like, but can't say enough about that experience.
And particularly for trips like that are maybe more time or cost intensive, the fact that you're like, "We need to do this again, but different," I think speaks volumes.
Yeah, for sure.
So on the flip side of that, what was the worst hospitality experience you've ever had?
I think for me, It's when it's been kind of the anti-hospitality experience. The
Mm,
places, particularly as a gay couple, where Martin and I would show up and not feel welcome.
mm,
And, it wasn't that people were hateful or mean to us outright. It was more about the apathy that we were shown compared to the other guests or the families that
mm,
were staying in a place. And so, I think like remembering the business we're in, and that's partly why I loved the work that we did in hotels and hospitality, was because there was so much diversity and people from different backgrounds and perspectives and guests coming and going from all over the world. And just not forgetting that what hospitality means.
mhm.
And even if you don't understand or you don't agree with, still being welcoming and hospitable toward guests is just so important. And those places where we felt uncomfortable and not welcome were probably the worst for us.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's counterintuitive to what the word hospitality is, right? We're just meant to welcome people and take care of people. And when you
Yeah.
think about what hospitality means to you, I want to ask if there's anyone or any brand that you feel like has mastered it. It sounds like Cork is doing an exceptional job of that, but is there anybody else that comes to mind?
I thought a lot about this too. Like, you know, it is hard to scale great hospitality. Like it just really is. And I think there are some groups that are doing some nice jobs. I've always admired like one of the brands you and I worked on, Design Hotels, and what they
Mhm.
do with their properties, and especially and bringing the location in. There's kind of a new-ish company called AutoCamp that I think is doing some really cool things and like the glamping space with just incredible locations around the country. But I think that like kind of the whole point of our conversation, like some of our best experiences in hospitality were those guest houses and Airbnbs and short-term rental places that we stayed in, because we were able to see the food and the travel, and it wasn't, a box and a bed, but it really brought in the location. I think that's just such such a big opportunity for short-term rentals like we talked about before, and welcoming guests from all over and helping them see and understand your culture or your location. And to me, that's really what hospitality is all about.
Absolutely. Well, Trey, it's been just a joy to get to reconnect with you and chat with you today.
So nice
Thank
to
you so
catch
much
up.
for the time.
Thank you.
All right, everyone, it's time for today's sweet summary where I break down the key insights and actionable takeaways from today's conversation. I absolutely loved reconnecting with Trey. I think he is just so talented at what he does. I learned so much from him when I got to work for him, and I continue to learn from him still to this day. And that's both tactical skills and his approach to work and to life. There are a few things I'm still thinking about from our conversation. Firstly, the power of the pause and listen. I mean, this is something that my husband is going to be particularly happy to hear that I've learned. But all joking aside, this is something I picked up just from watching him work. He never needed to be the first person to speak just for the sake of speaking. And is that rare in today's world or what? He would rather get all of the information first, and his curious nature and his ability to ask great questions allowed him to uncover so much more than if he had just rushed to judgment in the first place. It's as applicable to when he's managing a global headline worthy crisis as it is to when he's creating a brand or repositioning an existing one. And it's particularly relevant to complex situations where a variety of cultures or time zones or cross functional teams or people might be involved. Second, he talked about being able to bring to life a destination in a really authentic way and how that helps cut through that sea of sameness that the world has become and continues to become. Whether you have a hotel or a short term rental, if we are in hospitality, we should not be, as Trey put it, trying to save a penny to make a dollar. That does not mean that every experience needs to be luxurious. Actually, Trey said that he had some incredible stays at guest houses and rentals that weren't luxe at all when him and his husband were traveling the world for a year. And that it was the hotels and the hosts that thought about the guest experience from check in to checkout that really made them feel looked after. As Trey mentioned, nothing can sour a travel experience more than not feeling welcome somewhere. Overall, I've always admired Trey for his ability to figure things out, whether it be a career transition from one industry to another or squeezing all of his belongings into a backpack to travel the world between gigs. Trey just embodies adaptability. His resourcefulness and willingness to embrace new experiences is truly inspiring and a good reminder that with the right mindset, we can turn most challenges into opportunities for growth and discovery. That is, of course, if we're willing to pause and listen.